Well, thank you very much. It is my honor to be here today among so many people with so many fabulous, bright ideas and an enormous amount of energy and enthusiasm to actually make change and improve our communities. So today I want to talk to you a bit about energy for the future, specifically capitalizing on the digital revolution for healthy communities. It's really about time and it's about connection when we're talking about energy and the digital revolution. And with the digital revolution, we can have faster data, we can have a lot more data, we can put it together in a better way, and we can improve our management, which can help us to have more time. Digital technology today is used in energy systems, and you all use it, I am sure, on a very regular basis. I'm betting that almost everybody here has a cell phone, and most of you have smartphones. And you see, however, digital technology in so many different aspects of energy. When technology really started to advance, when in fact new digital technology helped to control the wind generators. We have control rooms that control our energy systems as well as other things, and you can also see analysis done using 3D digital technology. The next generation of digital technology, which, oh, by the way, probably starts, in 10 minutes, as in every 10 minutes or so, it seems like there's new digital technology coming out, but it always builds on technology that we already have. And the next piece of this really is, how do we more effectively use that technology to genuinely serve us and to serve our communities? So I want to talk about the smart grid and you. Now, in my world, typically when you talk about the smart grid, they're referring specifically to the electric utility dimension. I want to expand that and talk about it from the perspective of, you've got the electric utilities, you then wind up being connected through the digital connectors, Mediacom, et cetera, your cell phone provider, and so on. And therefore, you, the consumers, and when I'm talking about consumers, I'm talking about businesses as well. The smart grid, starting from the center of that circle, refers to the electric grid. And some of you are familiar with traditional technologies, coal generation, natural gas, and et cetera. And being in Iowa, you've undoubtedly seen wind farms. Certainly you've seen photographs of them in our media here in Iowa. And of course now we're starting to see some distributed resources. In some cases it's wind, but in this particular photograph you see some solar cells on a rooftop. That grid also connects then to the users. You've got generation, that's how we get the electricity, and it gets connected to the users that you use for all kinds of things when you, at work, at home, and so on. There's another dimension to the electric smart grid that is going to be perhaps an important dimension moving forward, and that is that we may see it more frequently and effectively connect distributed generation, such as photovoltaic solar cells, that are actually what that canopy is. And you can then see a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle on the same site drawing on that electricity. Altogether, you've got the generation and you've got the user, and it's connected back into the large grid. I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about another dimension in our cities. We've all been stuck in traffic, and I realize there's not as much traffic in Des Moines as there is in, let's say, the Washington, D.C. area where I live now. But nonetheless, there is traffic, and there are ways to control it more effectively so that indeed we can save time and have more connection with the people that we want to be connected to, and we do that through connection. So smart traffic management, I want to show you here that in some cases we have in this country some digital control systems that are in use that help us to manage traffic. And this is a photo of Ingersoll. That doesn't happen to be a high traffic time, but I know Ingersoll sometimes does have a lot of traffic. Signal preemption for emergency vehicles. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Certainly, that's very important if there is someone who needs to be rushed to the hospital, because a few minutes can make a difference in the eventual outcome of a patient. That technology has actually been around for decades and is used effectively in many places, but it has other uses as well. One of the things that some cities are experimenting with is to allow buses to have a similar capability. Typically, they don't have quite as much control as emergency vehicles, but nonetheless, allowing them to have some capability to manage the signals and therefore gain more speed and be a bit more mass transit-like, and making that bus service more attractive to users. Now, one of my personal favorites is cars that drive themselves. In fact, Google is advancing this technology in demonstration across the country. I understand that occasionally they bring these cars that drive themselves to state legislatures so that legislators can have that experience. That's a technology that some project will be available in about 10 years. Now, for those of us who are baby boomers, that seems like a really good idea, so that we can continue to have freedom, and particularly in our built environment, which really is quite spread out. That may be increasingly important, but that can also genuinely help us with managing our traffic so that we have more time and more time available for us to do the things that we really want to do with our lives. Smart workforce deployment. Iowa is actually a leader in advancing telecommunications technology, and to use it in a way that actually displaces the need for transportation. Some of you are familiar with the ICN, the Iowa Connection Network. And in fact, it's being rebuilt, as I understand it, at the end user points, and can be a very important tool as we move forward. Many of you work away from the office, but on any given point in time, less than 5% of the nation's knowledge workers who really do have the capability and really spend most of their time on the phone or at the computer, less than 5% are actually working remotely. We actually have some ways and an approach that can perhaps help us to move forward in using that technology in a way that we can displace long commutes by using digital technology. I especially like the guy who's working on the beach on his sand computer. So those of you who may have been involved or are knowledgeable about smart growth principles often hear about the live, work, play communities and the principles underpinning smart growth communities. Well, in fact, what often winds up happening is that you might live there, but you ultimately, in some cases, drive to play, although it's easier to create communities where you live and play in the same community. But very frequently, people still wind up driving to work. And there are a number of factors associated with that, and a lot of study about it. And whether or not we can address this in more traditional ways, I'm not convinced that we can, but I think that there is a way that we can address it and really make some progress towards actually building live, work, play communities by using digital technology. So in today's office functions, we have the big private sector, we have small business, we have government, and we have a variety of government agencies. They all have their own buildings, and they build them in different places. And then they require that their employees come to their buildings. Well, perhaps we can do something different, and in fact, have buildings across our metropolitan areas where all of those functions exist, and employees could have the opportunity to work in a building that is close to their home and works better in their lives. These buildings would be retrofitting existing buildings, most likely, and they would be supported with excellent telecommunications equipment. I, for one, have a partner who supports my telecommunications equipment, and it's a good thing because sometimes I get a little frustrated with that equipment. By having these work centers, you would in fact be able to have people not be responsible for their equipment and be able to go to these centers. They would also be equipped with excellent video conferencing. They could also serve to provide health care remotely, as is being done in some places, but it would be done in a center that provided a full structure community setting within a particular community. Now, how might that work in the Des Moines area? People drive into Des Moines to work every day from 17 different counties. Some of them spend 3 hours a day on the road in their commute. They wouldn't have to do this. People who live in Marshalltown might go to a work center in Marshalltown. People who live in Winterset or nearer to Winterset might go to a work center there in Winterset. And they would have all of that time available to them that they didn't otherwise have. Now, what are the benefits of looking at using this technology in a different way to actually support our communities? Well, many benefits. The first one is time. More time for our families and for our communities, for volunteering, such as many of you do here. It also would save energy. Fewer people on the road driving their vehicles. That is more money into our economies that really support us here in our communities. That also means less pollution. And less pollution both from the people who aren't driving, but also because then you can have an impact on congestion, i.e. you can reduce the number of cars and you can have less congestion, less waste associated with congestion, which also has a benefit to our environment. So how do you get there? Somebody said that in many cases we have these great TEDx events, and then people say, but I don't really know how to get involved. And the first thing that I want to tell you in a broad way is that typically to have technology advances and to see things change, you've got to have the technology. We have the technology. You also have to have the policies. We have some of the policies. We could have more of the policies. Those policies typically are put in place to reduce the risk so that, in fact, you have capital mobilization, and you can see the investment, you can see that technology actually being used, and we can make these changes and gain these benefits. Now, also, in the case of some of these ideas that I've talked about, perhaps in particular associated with the smart traffic management as well as the distributed workplace, I think what was just mentioned here was the Metropolitan Planning Authority. Citizens have the opportunity to provide input to metropolitan planning authorities and perhaps see some change come as a result of that. Now, I have to tell you that I share the sentiments here that are from John Chambers, who is the CEO of Cisco. The exciting thing is that you haven't seen anything yet with where technology will go. If you look at what could happen if you connect the unconnected, and I would add, and if you could really accelerate the connection that's already there, but use it even more effectively. And you can do this not just with video, but with connecting thousands and billions of more IP-enabled devices. We are just getting started. I believe that that is the case here. We are just getting started with using the digital revolution to really help us with energy, with using energy, with supporting our communities going forward. And we do that by working together as people within the community and with people across the nation and across the world. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to having more interaction with you.